Hi everyone, welcome to week 12 of Lit 215. This week we're going over chapters 7 through 10 of In the Time of the Butterflies, and then also starting the film by the same name. Salma Hayek stars in it. It's a great film. It really has, I think maintained its appeal, but I hope you guys enjoy it. So let's get started with our assignments for this week. So we've got Reading Quiz 12 due Saturday and Discussion Board 12 also due Saturday with responses to classmates on Sunday. I decided to kind of push the due dates back just a little bit since I know that it may take a little more time to watch the film and to do the reading this week. Make sure that you review the literary project draft requirements. I'm moving the draft up a week, and before everybody freaks out and gets angry, I'm doing so that we can have time to conference and meet one-on-one based on your drafts. And I promise that this will eventually, lead to stronger projects, and I think it'll actually help you guys kind of finish the semester out strong. So we've got 2 weeks between now and then. I'll get your literary critiques back to you this week, and then all you have to do is start focusing on how you're going to kind of draw all of these readings you've done and all of this new knowledge together into your project. So let's start with In the Time of the Butterflies. Chapter 7 was Maria Theresa's chapter. I love that they call her Mate. I think it's so cute. But she's the youngest of the sisters, right? And in that first chapter we saw from her, she was definitely very young. And I think a lot of you commented on that, how she seemed just like very innocent and naive almost. And we see that in this chapter, but then we also see her start to grow up and kind of find her place in the resistance. She feels a lot of pressure to marry someone and fall in love and find her true love, but she's finding that a little difficult to do, which I think is reminiscent of a lot of us at her age. She at one point says, "Why is it every man I can't love seems to feel I would if Papa hadn't died?" Which I think is incredibly tragic, but just also shows us how important her father was to her and how important father and kind of paternal roles are in the Dominican Republic. So Maria Theresa, after she goes to school, she ends up moving to the capital to move in with Minerva, and there we're seeing kind of Trujillo's regime tighten around the capital. We hear mention of the capital and what's happening there, and that's where all of the drama is. And I think Minerva really wants to be in the middle of it, and Maria's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to be part of it, So Minerva at one point awarded her law degree, but without her license to practice, which means essentially that she went to school for nothing. She was the first person in her family to graduate from college, which is a huge accomplishment for anyone, but especially for a female in the Dominican Republic during the 60s. I mean, it's incredible. And she was given her degree, but not allowed to practice with it, which I think was definitely a literal smack in the face. During this time also, Mate meets Palomino, who we find out is named Leandro, or Leo for short. And she feels like she's finally given a reason to involve herself in the resistance. She says, "I've always liked men. Now I can use my talents for the revolution," which I thought was funny and kind of a show of her personality. So this is kind of how Mate becomes involved in the resistance, and we definitely, like I said, see her grow so much in this chapter. Next, we come back to Patria, who, if you guys remember, wanted to be a nun when she grew up and then fell in love with Pedrito and decided instead that she was going to get married and become a mother, which she did and did very well for almost 20 years. And then she gets to a point where she's starting to really question her life and her choices and just her role as a woman and a person. And she's worrying about her son Nelson and her daughter Norris and how they're involved in the resistance or are close to it because of Minerva and her husband and Maria. So on June 14th, she actually travels to Salcedo and is going for a church retreat. She's still a very devout Catholic, and she witnesses an air raid where Trujillo's government drops bombs on a city near her, and she sees these boys, essentially, who are, working for the resistance. She sees them murdered by Trujillo's regime. And this kind of causes a large shift in Patria and who she is and what she feels her values are. She decides that her home is going to be the mother house of the revolution, and it's almost like she's now the mother of the resistance, which I think is just really cool. And we see the women the Mirabal sisters just really going all in, building bombs and hiding ammunition in their yards and really like doing some very extreme things against the government, things that take a lot of guts. There is a new law, we find out, if you're found to be against the government. We find out in chapter 8, not only will your family be arrested, but any land or property you own will be taken, which is particularly worrisome for Patria, whose husband, Pedrito Gonzalez, has owned the land, like his family, the Gonzalez family, has owned their land for over 100 years. And the home that stands on their land and everything they own definitely does come under attack in this section as well. So in chapter 9, we shift back to Dede, who is kind of going between 1994 in this interview and also 1960. She's sort of thinking back to when everything started to kind of go south. And she says at one point, I didn't get involved until it was too late. And her niece asks her, I've always wondered, why did you not go with them? And in this chapter, we see a lot of Dede kind of going back and forth about where her loyalty is and what she's willing to risk. She's definitely unhappy in her marriage with her husband, and she's missing this life that she could have had. But at the same time, she's not sure that she has the strength to fight against this macho that she married, but also this regime that she's afraid of. And, she finally decides, okay, I'm going to join. And then she comes home and realizes that her sons are gone. And her husband took them to her mother-in-law's as sort of a show of his power over her. And then before I think Dede can really even come to terms with her own feelings about what's happening, then the arrests start. So we see the husbands, Pedrito, Manolo, and Leo, arrested. Mate and Minerva are also arrested, and this is really difficult for the entire family. We see that they're being spied on, that the government is really kind of closing in on them. Eventually, Minerva is released, but she remains active kind of in this resistance because she believes so strongly. And Dede has people in town coming up to her and being like, help the butterflies, keep them alive. They're really like a sign of hope for so many people in the Dominican Republic. And Dede's not really sure how she feels about it. The Mariposas are, her family, but is she one of them? And I think that's what we see a lot of in this chapter. The last chapter of the section I wanted you guys to look at, we come back to Patria. And Patria, I think we've seen so much of her development as a character, from a young girl in school to a mother, a resistor, and also a wife. When her son and husband are taken, she's overcome with grief to the point where Alvarez writes that she almost loses her sanity. And I think this shows us really how important family is to those who live in the Dominican Republic and also to those in the resistance. We also see a character named Captain Pena, who I'm not really sure what his goals are. He's a police officer in the town. He comes by to visit Patria several times and almost taunts her with her husband and her son's imprisonment. And eventually he actually buys the Gonzalez farm from the government. And then he comes by and he sort of wants to meet with Patria and almost establish a truce. And I want you guys to kind of think about why this is significant and what his motivation is. We also see the church, which plays a huge role in the Mirabal sisters' lives, being attacked by Trujillo, because I think the the bishops and the priests are finally pushed to speak out against the government, and we're seeing that Trujillo's not having that. And we see that Trujillo actually, at one point, he sends prostitutes to the church. People in town who are with the government empty latrines, which are essentially outdoor bathrooms, into the church. And these are really obvious ways to desecrate the church. I think this is more insulting even than someone being murdered. Like, it's more symbolic, I think, than just killing a priest off. But literally, pardon my French, but literally taking a shit on the church. I mean, just think about how, for someone whose lives revolve around the church, how impactful is that? And then finally, we end this section with Patria petitioning for Nelson's release. She makes an arrangement with Captain Pena and goes to the capital with her daughter Norris. And I got a really uneasy feeling at the end of this, because Norris definitely catches Trujillo's attention, and he is aware of the Mirabal sisters, and he knows that they are a threat to him. So I'm definitely curious to see how this develops. But that is this section for this week. A important part of this story is the Cuban Revolution. And this is mentioned on New Year's Day, 1959, at the beginning of Patria's second section, chapter 9, I believe. So Fidel Castro was a lawyer and a revolutionist in Cuba before he overthrew the Batista government and became the head of Cuba himself. And his actions in Cuba were hugely inspiring to the neighboring Dominican Republic, who was also fighting under a terrible dictator. But I think the irony of it is that, as we know now, Castro himself turned out to be a much more terrifying dictator than Batista ever was. And I think this sort of brings to light the relationship between Latin America and the US, and how pivotal and how sort of tense that relationship has always been. So, what does that mean for someone like Alvarez, the author of this novel, to move to the US, after all of this happening in Latin America? And how would Americans view people from this area and their struggle? So I just want you guys to kind of be aware of those outside events that are influencing the novel. And then finally, we are going to look at the film for this week. You should have access to the YouTube recording of the film. It should be free. I did send the link out without ads, but if you're for some reason seeing ads, let me know. And I'm just interested to see how you guys think the film compares to the book so far. What do you think of how each sister is portrayed, how they approach it? Are the filmmakers doing this story justice? So that is the other reading for this week. What I wanted you guys to do before next week is to start thinking about your project drafts. Decide on what format you'd like your project to take. So a PowerPoint, an analysis essay, a poster or a visual of some kind, or a creative writing or original literary piece. So these are all described in the assignment sheet on Blackboard. You do not have to turn them in this week, but I would like you to start thinking about them and start kind of planning for it, because let me tell you, the end of the semester, it really comes up quick, and I don't want any of us to be caught off guard. All right? So start looking this over. Continue with the novel for this week, and I will talk to you guys on our discussion board.